Good afternoon, Chair Vollendroff, members Holmes and Garrett, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you, Deb. Good afternoon. I'll now convene the executive management team for Wednesday, April 23rd. And we will jump right into our agenda with the first item, which is Mark Webster with a legislative update. Mark?
Good afternoon, Chair Vollendroff and members Garrett and Holmes. This is going to be short, as I don't want to repeat too much of what I talked about yesterday at Board Caucus. I will just reiterate that our legislative agenda passed. We got our 2 bills and our 2 confirmations, which is great. Second, some of you may remember the legislative implementation tracker that the incomparable Jessica Dang developed, in which you've seen in the 2023 and 2024 interims. We're going to be working on a new and improved version of that we're going to bring to you this summer, so coming soon. So instead of going over the bills that passed, since I did that yesterday, I kind of wanted to look forward to the interim and the next session. I've talked about it at EMT and at caucus throughout the year, but I think there's a growing interest in some policy ideas, and I think they'd really benefit from the board's thinking on them. Again, you've heard me say it, but the number of members who talked about a pretty thorough rethink of the licensing statutes in RCW 6624 was kind of astonishing. It just kept coming up in meetings that had nothing to do with that topic. That's obviously a very, very big project, and one that's probably not right to tee up for a short session in a bad budget environment. But I just think that this is something to keep monitoring, and perhaps something to tee up for one of the industry advisory groups that I know that the board has talked about reviving. Another topic that has come up, and the policy is going to hold a discussion on coming up in May, has to do with shared spaces. So this is a key component of the outdoor dining bill, HB 1515, and it's come up with regard to multiple licensees sharing an indoor space in a bill, House Bill 1701, that didn't pass. So indoor, outdoor, whatever, I think this is something that we're going to be talking more about going forward, and that the legislature, I think, is going to have to, given that the sunset clause in 1515 is coming up fairly quickly at the end of calendar year 2027. And again, we are about to embark on a pilot, thanks to the bill. So this is a good opportunity to figure out where are the pain points for licensees, or licensees getting annoyed when, they may get cited for the actions of somebody who they're sharing a space with. Where are the pain points for our E&E staff, for local governments, and how do we want to address those? And again, the legislature had hearings on cannabis consumption events, or kind of social consumption in cannabis this year. You saw the one pager that the research team did as well. So that's another big issue that isn't going away. So how do we want to engage with this? And of course, as we get set to open the next window for applications in the social equity and cannabis program, there's still continued interest in evaluation, identifying the barriers that applicants face, from, we've talked about it again, local government ordinances to just the broader market issues in cannabis. We're going to be doing some work on that during the interim, but it's an important topic that we can keep thinking about as we move forward with that next window. And of course, then we've got the perennial issues, among them legalizing psychedelic therapies, cannabis home grow, and high potency THC. So there are others, of course, but we've just spent kind of a long time on issues that other people are bringing to you. And I definitely want to make sure that we carve out some room for you all to, propose ideas or projects, making sure that you have the ability to tackle something that matters to you. So again, if you have ideas on that, or just want to talk about it going forward, let's make sure that we carve out some space here at caucus or elsewhere to make sure that we can get your ideas out there. And with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mark. I don't have any questions, but I will say I appreciate you bringing up the interim and already starting to think about that. And absent Will, I want to wait until I have a discussion one-on-one with him before saying too much about it, but I will say, and I've said it at both caucus meetings and probably board meetings, I do want the board to weigh in more on some of the agency request legislation and policy discussions. It's funny, as you were talking, I was writing down all these things, and then at the end you circled back and covered every single one of them. And it's things like high THC concentration products, home growth, psychedelics, the shared spaces, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all things that I'd like for the board to start having more policy discussions. And what I've talked about is looking at the strategic plan and recognizing that our strategic plan is great. I think it does a really nice job on the operations side of what we do and less on the policy side. And so what I'd like to do is spend more time having substantial policy discussions. And the venue for that, I'm not sure, which is one of the reasons why I want to talk to Will about that, because we've got the policy discussions that Justin leads, we've got caucus, we've got board meetings, we've got executive management team, but trying to find the right space for that. But I look forward to having conversations with this team and with my fellow board members so that we're really clear on where we all land. Because I, again, am just one perspective, and I look forward to hearing from my fellow board members where they land on these things. So any other questions or comments from Mark from the board?
I was gonna say, and I mean, we have a process and have had a process in the past. And I thought I'm trying to see if it was EMT or board caucus, but we used to talk about, we used to do exactly what you're saying. Do you, and I don't know, Mark, if we've done it since you've been on board, but Becky, do you
I don't think so.
recall how we used to do it? Because this isn't anything new.
It's not. I think we used to do it during EMT.
It was EMT, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, we've always done this. We just didn't do it, I don't think, this last session. Or I don't think we've done it since Mark has been on board.
It's
Yeah,
been
that would
quite
be
a
new to
few
me.
years since we've done it.
Right.
Because I don't think we've actually done it at least in the same depth that I'm hoping that we do it since I've been on the board, which has been the last couple, it's 2.5 years. So I look forward to figuring out a way to bring that back and have even more in-depth policy discussions.
And maybe that
particularly-
could be, now that we're talking about EMT being more focused subject matter,
Yeah.
that just become a subject matter of a EMT.
I think that's a great possibility.
Yeah.
Member Holmes?
Just wanted to point out two things. First of all, I would love to have this conversation. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would just toss that on the table rather than saying some of my ideas at this point. Sooner than later is probably better, but I'd say that there's the wheel's already been invented in the sense that the Social Equity and Cannabis Task Force report has some very, I think, interesting ideas that we should really dig into further. I would recommend everyone go back to that interview with Allison Holcomb on the 10th anniversary of the passage of 502. She talked a lot about the board's authority, its discretion to move forward and advance a positive agenda. So I'll just leave it at that for now, but I've been thinking about this a lot and would really love the opportunity to, explore it further with our fellow board members.
That's great. That's great. Just also going back to Mark, your comments around the alcohol RCWs. And I was actually earlier thinking around the alcohol and cannabis advisory groups and thinking,
Yes.
board member Holmes, that will give you and that group some really substantial policy conversations to have related to that. So it's a good possibility there. Okay. Anything else from Mark? All right, Mark, anything else do you want to add?
Nope. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, next up we have Becky, who's going to give us an update from licensing.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Vollendroff and board members Garrett and Holmes. I just have a couple of updates because we really are in deep with the new leads. But I want to start sharing just a little bit about social equity. So the licensing division presented to the City of Linwood Planning Commission regarding social equity program. Their goal is to answer any questions that the commission might have, to tell more about the program, and then their current allotment for retailers. And also share that they don't have an allotment for retailers any longer. That currently Linwood has 4 retail title certificate holders because there was a ban or moratorium for retail cannabis that's been in place since the very beginning. The presentation was successful, that the team was able to address the commission's questions effectively, that the commission is looking at making the recommendation for an ordinance that would allow the retail cannabis in specific zones. So that's positive. If you recall, that board member Garrett has been so helpful in leading this challenge on us really reaching out to local authorities again, but in a different way, talking to their planning commission and really sharing information about their tax distribution. That also helped with us. The team also met with Yakima, with their District 2, to provide clarification about receiving that exercise tax distribution. And they were able to gain approval for additional retail cannabis businesses in non-incorporated areas. Again, this is a huge win for our retailers in the Yakima area. It was a collaborative meeting. We also were accompanied by, it wasn't just licensing, of course, we were also accompanied by our finance folks. They were able to answer questions for Yakima as well. And then the team has also been reaching out, as you know, to the Washington cities. So the Association of Washington Cities, we feel like we've gained some ground in that respect, that they have met with us. They also are looking at setting up monthly meetings so we can continue to have conversations about some of the challenges our retail licensees, specifically our social equity licensees, are going through right now. So again, all extremely positive that's happening. So questions before I move on to leads?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to make a comment, and this is directed to Board Member Garrett and to you, Becky, and your team. And that is that I want to acknowledge all of the work that you guys have done around social equity. And sometimes it gets lost in some of the challenges that we face because it's complex. I believe that the team has done just exemplary work in that area. And I, like to take pride in the work that I do. And when I talk to people outside of the LCB about what we do, I talk about the social equity program. And I talk about the work that's been done to right some of the wrongs on the war on drugs. And so again, despite challenges and perhaps even feedback that we've received, from my perspective as board chair, the work that Board Member Garrett has done with the licensing team, the work in the legislature, we have made progress and we continue to make progress. And I just really wanted to acknowledge both you, your team, and Board Member Garrett for your work, and look forward to seeing the continued progress in this particular area. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
So
Okay,
now I
Becky,
want to
go
talk
ahead.
a little bit about everybody knows we went live on March 31st, that we've had some struggles that I call them challenges, and that, we were all continuing to be excited about our new system. That there wasn't anything else to do but get rid of that archaic system. We needed to move on. We needed to move forward. And so we've continued to experience some technical difficulties. And so we just ask for patience as we work through these challenges, that customers can expect delays in processing time. That I know that questions are going to be how long delays. All I can tell you is that we're still experiencing issues with some customers struggling to get into our new system, that we continue to communicate to our customers to review the website and resources available and to register for the portal. Communications has been a fantastic partner with licensing and making sure we're updating and providing new information. That on the positive side, that we have received positive feedback from customers, especially in customer service, stating how much they've enjoyed applying online. They get to pay online. This is all very new to some of them, or actually most of them, that it's the first time that they've actually had a visual. They can visually see where they are in the process of their special occasion license, for instance. That I think that most of the feedback we've received on the positive side has been from our special occasion folks, and that our staff actually walk them through the process. And so instead of it being, here's your application, you have 45 days in which, all of that they're sitting with them and walking them through the application if they're experiencing difficulties, which of course means that somebody else is then waiting in line. But we're hoping that, as they have this success, that the next time around they'll be in the system, they'll know how to use it and be able to get right on and process their application. That customer service again has done a fantastic job with their phone calls. Phone calls have more than doubled in 2 weeks. So we received 1,700 just this month. So that's a lot of phone calls for a month, right? For 2 weeks, it was 2 weeks. I think we were at 1,200. So again, lots of phone calls. We're still having a waiting time. We look at the waiting time customer service where folks call us, and it's less than a minute that they have to wait on the phone call to get on with somebody else. But there is a wait time. There's also a wait time if they want to access a portal. Although licensing doesn't support that piece, we do recognize that that's a struggle. And so when when a customer can't get through at the IT portal side, they'll call our customer service or the last person that they've had contact with. All this I'm saying is that we are improving, that staff are that they're getting more confident in how to process an application. It really is, everybody is learning at the same time, the applicant and our investigators. So nobody is an expert in the system yet. That we're all kind of learning as we go, and still with challenges and bugs that staff are either figuring workarounds, or thank goodness for Tony and George, they're helping us move things every week that gets rectified. So that we're hoping again for continued improvement as time goes by. But that really has been all that licensing has been doing, is learning how to process applications in this last month. So with that, I'll open it up and see if you have questions that I might be able to answer.
Thank you for that update. Any questions for Becky? I'm seeing none.
No,
Oh,
I have
okay.
a Becky,
Go ahead.
and this is a whole different subject, but I am getting more and more inquiries, and you and I talked a little bit yesterday about it. The kitchen inside of a licensee, and whether the person in there has to be the employee of the restaurant, and folks trying to do up small businesses trying to do other things around bringing in caterers, different caterers, showcasing caterers. Some folks, and I think Jim, you brought it up months ago with the food truck.
Yeah.
Where are we in a conversation around looking at that whole thing? Because I'm getting more and more people inquiring, hey, is it okay to do this, while the kitchen is being remodeled? Is it okay? Where are we with all of that?
So I'll answer part of it, and then I'm going to let Justin answer the other piece of this. But
Okay.
what I will say is that when it comes to being allowed to not have a kitchen open, if you have a license to a beer, wine, spirits restaurant license, your main business is to be a restaurant. It is not to serve alcohol. It is a restaurant first, alcohol second. They're required to have everything in order to accomplish that in their kitchen. So if their kitchen is closed, then they shouldn't be serving alcohol, not even temporarily bringing food in from someplace else. That's just not allowed. It wouldn't even be allowed by rule. Again, that statute requires that whatever your business is what you're supposed to be doing in there. So beer, wine, spirits restaurant is a restaurant first, and they serve beer and wine and spirits second. So as far as where we are with some of these other allowances, I'm going to have to kick that over to Justin.
Sure. So, kind of piggybacking on what Becky said, a lot of the alcohol license, particularly on-premise consumption licenses, have the parameters around food service set statutorily. So we're not actually able to change everything by rule. We would have to look at some legislative requests. Now, having said that, there was a bill this year that passed that basically opens that conversation up because the breweries wanted to have an opportunity to contract with food trucks and or a contract kitchen in order to satisfy food service if they have a restaurant, which the breweries can apply to have a separate restaurant license. And so with that, there were particular provisions carved out for the breweries and microbreweries. Unfortunately, there's a lot of work to be done for all the other license types, but that does open the conversation. It also sets, I believe, a precedent for the legislature to be looking at to further those potential options for other folks. But Becky's right. Until we see that legislative change, we're fairly limited in what we can do. Now we're going to have this policy discussion on shared spaces in May. And that's going to cover a whole bunch of things, not on a specific rule, but trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like? Because we are hearing, multiple restaurants want to share those outdoor spaces. And we have that in 1515 that we're going to have to address. And so there's a number of those types of things where I think that part of the conversation will be coming into play as well. And so as we're looking at the shared space issue, I think it's prudent to also be looking at, what could this look like, and potentially are there agency request ideas that we want to draft for consideration. So I think, we don't have more than that at this particular point, but it is something that, there are some bills that we're going to be implementing and also other policy discussions that will have some of that conversation going on, but nothing immediately actionable other than implementation of that bill once the governor signs it.
So in a case where it's, I want to say the Elks or whatever these membership clubs are, in the case of a membership club where it's members, if a member is doing the food, is that considered the employee? How does that work?
So for private clubs, that's actually the exception to all of what I just said.
Okay.
Private clubs are allowed to sell alcohol, spirits, beer, and wine, and they don't have required food service as part of that, because they're not a restaurant that's open to the public for that purpose. So as like a fraternal club or something along those lines, or a sports club or whatever, those are, membership clubs, nonprofit organizations, and they are not set up to be a restaurant. And so they're set up to allow alcohol service at that private club, which means that there's not really a component of food that's required because they're not a restaurant. So it's kind of, I know that they act like restaurants sometimes, they'll have a kitchen and whatnot, but that is the exception to all of the stuff that I just explained.
Okay, so, and I think most of the ones that I'm hearing from falls into that category, but then people are telling them that it's what we just described, what Becky just described. So they're being advised and told one thing. Okay, that helps me a lot in being able to answer some of the questions. Yeah.
Well, I think that if they're looking for clarification, they can certainly, that especially if they're a private club, they can reach out to who their last licensing investigator was, or to Misty Jones, and she's our Misty Jones is our liquor manager, and she's extremely knowledgeable and always willing to talk to a licensee.
Okay. Thank you.
Aside from Becky, Misty's my go-to, so I totally agree. For alcohol related things. I just had a quick comment that I wanted to make. So my heart raced when you said 1,200 calls. I think it was 1,200 calls. As a person who doesn't like to answer any calls, I mean, that's just a lot of calls in that volume. So it's amazing how your staff have stepped up during this time. And I just wanted to acknowledge the work that they're doing. But Brian, I also wanted to acknowledge Julie. And I don't know who's working with Julie. I just saw a communication that went out this morning. I mean, I just seen extraordinary efforts to reach out and be connecting with our licensees and people who are impacted by this switch. And the day that we went live was a big day for the LCB that's been years in the making. So Tony, your contributions to that, and I mean, just it's been an amazing effort. And my spouse works on things like this, go live kind of things, and he works at home, and so I listen all the time and just hear the extraordinary amount of work that goes on. And so from that perspective, I really do recognize all the work that people are doing to address the issues as they come up and to make sure that we continue to operate in the way that we do as effectively as we can. So just again, recognizing everybody's efforts. And I do hope that everybody is passing this on to their staff, that the board recognizes the effort and the work. And Tony, simple things like gestures of appreciation and acknowledgement go a long way. So I know you've done a lot of that, and really great work. So appreciate everybody's effort. Okay, Becky, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right along, we've got our first in-person update from our Director for Enforcement and Education. So Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you, and glad you're here in person with us today.
All right, thank you, Chair Bollendroff, Board Member Holmes, Board Member Garrett. Good to see you all. And like I said, definitely good to see you in person. So I know we usually submit a lot of slides with some stats on it. I'm just going to follow a probably shorter narrative than normal. And if there's some specific questions about individual stats or something like that, we can definitely go to the slides if you have specific questions about some of the things we normally report. So we spent the last month on top of some onboarding activities and meet and greets with me, focused on required trainings and qualifications to maintain our certs. So access criminal history certification, criminal history records, firearms qualifications, all that is falling into the month of March. So if you look at some of our admin versus field time numbers, you might see a little degrade in that, but that'll explain it. As far as partnerships, Central Reason, they've done an excellent job in reaching out to the business owners and some of the community planners with the Seattle Nightlife and the Bellevue Nightlife Association, still working on compliance checks and understanding what it is we look for when we come out, and also some of the things that our officers expect to see when it comes to some of the new after hours dancing establishments that are now getting liquor licenses. We're also spending a good bit of time with community partners and planners. I think there's been several business owners as well as the Pride Association who we spend weekly meetings with as they prep for these activities that are coming up in the next couple of months. Some work with the schools. Our education team reached out to our original high school reached out to our education team and wanted the staff to come and give a brief to a parent group. I think that number's up to about 75 folks who are going to join on youth access and responsible planning for some of the graduation and summer parties that we have going on. So we'll have an enforcement lieutenant giving that brief with Matt McCallum. And then the Northwest officers are working with the Northwest Career Tech Academy and Skagit Community College to brief Running Start on some of our enforcement activities and youth access activities. We're still seeing contact from local PDs for help as well for some of the community events and festivals in the East and down South. As far as measuring productivity, again, I mentioned you'll see a drop in our hours from the field versus admin, and that drop in productivity is primarily because of that training and because of some of the tasks that we've been doing for this month. When you look at some of the major trends in reporting for our officer activity, I do want to highlight there's a spike in tobacco premises checks, like it's up about 1,200, but that's primarily because we're cleaning up some of the SINAR reporting and some of the annual requirement for that. And then you'll also see in some of the substantiated complaint rates on one of the slides, you'll see there's a 57% substantiated rate for compliance consultants. When I looked at it, it's not really statistically relevant because you're talking 16 complaints versus the vastly different numbers for our officers. And I think the reason for that is the compliance consultant rate, they know what they're looking for. They're usually initiating a complaint for something they've seen when they've been out on a check and it goes to an officer versus what the officers are seeing are complaints coming from outside. And it's a much larger number. So while it's lower in percentage, in aggregate, it's much higher. We didn't see any notable changes in our youth access compliance rates. That may be a good news story because both of the tobacco unit and the cannabis unit are up to 100%. So we've got more officers going out, visiting these premises, and we're still seeing similar numbers. So, if there's a question about if we had more people, would we see a higher non-compliance rate? We haven't seen that yet. So I think that's a good news story. Lastly, I'll just briefly cover recruiting because we talk about those numbers quite a bit. We're at a 13% vacancy rate. That equates to about 23 vacancies. 19 of those vacancies are permanent. 4 of those are proviso, and those are LEO delivery positions that'll go away at the end of June. Of those 19 that I'm working on, we've made 4 tentative offers, bringing us down to 15. We have 7 in a process, either between background checks, between physicals, or between an interview, bringing us down to 8. And then we have 4 of those positions that I mentioned that are going to become compliance consultants.
On the alcohol side?
Yeah, on the alcohol side. So, and we've identified those positions. We've notified the bargaining unit, and we're working through the demand to bargain process. So I expect still to have those positions filled somewhere near the end of the biennium. So we're really looking at right now, if I were projecting later into the summer, about 4 positions that we don't have a plan for as far as hiring. And we're hoping maybe we'll hear some good news on salaries that may help with that. So that's a general overview for what's been going on so far. I don't know if you or Board Member Garrett or Board Member Holmes have any specific questions for me.
Any questions for Larry?
Good. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. Larry, I do have just one quick question. So you and I have talked about this on individual basis, and it's around settlement cases and compromises.
Yes, sir.
And can you just talk to us a little bit about what you've done in terms of onboarding and discussions with your staff? The board has had ongoing discussions with E&E around what we're hoping to see in some of those settlement and compromise cases. I'm just wondering if you could just fill us in on that a little bit.
Yeah, I met with Shell Warner and his staff member, Emily, and I've also met with DC Rinke. So when I looked into it, I think our initial conversation was around some of the language in those settlement agreements, and particularly when there's been a board decision or a judicial decision on going forward with, have you paid that fine? Have you met the requirements for that settlement agreement? And then I even spoke to them and said, there's a point after the comma where you give a very definitive point, pay your fine or your owed taxes by this date, or you lose your license. And then there's another comma, or you reach out to the presiding officer. What I asked them to do is be more definitive in those responses. They need to be in alignment with what the board decision was. And that second or needs to come out. And the second or basically, at least in my view and in the conversation with DC Rinke, what that gave us was the board's made a decision. They set a final date. There shouldn't be an additional addendum to that until either that date is met or not. And if that date is not met, the license is suspended and they go to the next step versus a phone call being made the board's not aware of or the decision makers weren't aware of. So moving forward with the ones we see in the future, we should see that definitive language. And then I'll be able to reach back out and find out if that kind of meets the expectations of the board or if we need to do some more adjustment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, one other thing. So to be clear on the mitigating circumstances, a lot of that language was may do certain things. And I'll give you a specific example. Somebody has sold alcohol to a minor twice. And in the first settlement agreement, they've said something like, well, the staff may use a scanner. I'm more interested in wills.
Exactly.
What will they actually do? If we're going to settle a case that we're actually looking to specific changes that are not, well, they may do this. No. We want to see what they're actually going to do and be held accountable to some of those changes. Yeah, so that's the last thing I want to add.
Maybe it shall. Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And in reading those, and I've attended after your recommendation, I attended a few of those conferences. I think, there may have been an effort to try to show an image of working with them or show an image of giving them a little bit of leeway, left and right limits. But I think, like you said, they may leave it to interpretation. So we can definitely make sure that that language is also addressed.
Great, thank you. And I want to be clear, we do want to work with our
Of course.
licensees and we want to educate. But there also comes a point where sales of age restricted products is a problem, and particularly when there's a repeat pattern. So,
Completely
all
agree.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Moving right along, we're up for our communications update with Brian.
Thank you, Chair Vollendroff. Member Holmes, I think Ollie has stepped away. She said she would. Just briefly, I think on a few things. On the media side, it continues to be fairly slow. This is unheard of in my many years here at the LCB, but it has been that way for the last couple of years. Yes, keep doing that. We still probably get more than most. We get one, at least probably a day that comes through. The only kind of significant article that might still be out there is had several conversations with the Seattle Times about the adult entertainment issue, and supplied some data that licensing helped with, but look for that. Haven't seen anything come through. A lot of times our stuff comes, I don't know what our take's going to be on it. It's not someone that I remember following this issue last year in particular, but our stuff, so that, you know, tends to come out on Sundays, you know, if you remember that, and those things, you can see it on the front
Can
page
you
of the
refresh me?
paper.
What's the question? What?
It's where are we now? And a lot of that really defers to the Department of Labor and Industries. They wrote the rules on it. They're supposed to be in charge of it, you know, but they inform us. We had some of the data that we made available to them, talk through the history and that type of stuff. So it's kind of see how many are there now, which are, I think, roughly a dozen that have contacted us that plan to do it or are doing that now in this area. Justin just did a piece the other day and appreciate his help calling the experts here. And Justin's always so knowledgeable about things, but did one out of the blue on the tiers. I don't know why, but there was an Eastern Washington reporter that wanted to look into how the tier structure came about and how that's working out now. So if you haven't seen that in our news clips, there's something that we don't typically see all the time. My group, we're involved with the major agency stuff that you heard Becky talk about, you heard Tony talk about, but we appreciate your comments and all the good things you said, because there's so many people across the agency that were so involved with SMP, you know, no more than probably Tony and the licensing folks. But as you said, Julie's been so committed to this project all the way through. I hired her to be the person on this project, and she's been so dedicated through and cares about things. That's what you want an employee, right? To really care, to make sure that it's right. And that continues on. But we're doing the work that others are doing well, is trying to wind that down and communicate what we need to. I'm looking forward to being able to have more of her time back. So back as a communications person, we'll see what's next. Another project that's kind of winding down is the SharePoint Online. So we've been working on replacing the agency intranet. So it started over a year ago. It had an end of life cycle, the former intranet, and moving over division by division over time. That's, you know, it's been fun. It's been a fun project, but we're ready to be done with that thing, and we're getting very close. Recently was finance. I think last week went live. Enforcement is soon to go live. And licensing will kick off next week. We delayed them so that they get a ton of other work that they had to do this past year. But it's one of the fun things, and I think it's valuable to employees. And it's been a great project for us to be able to work with each of the divisions as we went through. But IT has been a steady partner, obviously, through this and throughout the way. And some folks that I hadn't quite worked with before. And then what we're looking forward to working on is all the work that will be tied in with social equity. And as Becky said, we're kind of joined at the hip in some ways in social equity with the work that we do. We're starting off, Becky, tomorrow we're meeting with some of your folks, and I should probably reach out to Ollie and talk about that. We have a communications plan that licensing hasn't yet seen, but we're getting down to the wire. We're going to start talking about, announcing that out to the public, instead of making sure that everybody's on board. I think our last communication plan last time went well. We had some metrics that showed that it was reaching our target audience, and we hope to have that same success. I turned over some of this, more of this over to Sam. She's such a rock star and growing in her skills and trying to give her more things. She hasn't had a lot of experience in communications planning. And so kind of working with her and trying to mentor her through this stuff too. So I'm really lucky to have a great team as we plow through this and look to the work that's ahead. And, you know, I guess lastly, just on a small thing, we did that the board stand out there. I know, Jim, I know you saw it. I just thought it might be decent to have out here. Pete, if you have any thoughts on that later on, you take a look at that. I don't want to get it tweaked. Jim, give it the go ahead. But it kind of lays out who you guys are when they come here. A lot of people, of course, are new to a board meeting and some of the basic rules that you established here for how we work. And just let me know. We put that in the stand right outside the door. So.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course.
I would can't help but make a couple of additional comments. And it maybe is premature to go into much detail, but I will give you a heads up. So I talked to the director this week, yesterday. And one of the things, I know at the end of session, Mark always puts out a kind of summary of the session.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in having him work with you and your team to put something out from the perspective of the board. So I want to start having some more conversations about how can the board put out information? You know, where are we at with things? And so just again, I haven't really thought it through beyond bringing it up with Will, getting his, you know, yes, I think we can talk about that. And just again, putting it on your radar that we may have more conversations. And it's less of a directive than it is let's have a conversation about what can we do to further the purpose of, for example, the legislative outcome would be to be sharing, you know, what we accomplished this session, what's on our plate as a result of this session, what are the budget implications for the LCB as a result of this session. So anyway, you'll hear more about that.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Justin, who's going to give us a little.
All right. So you heard a little bit of stuff, so hopefully I won't be too redundant, but this morning I had to answer some questions around some of the legislation and prioritization, those types of things. So I just wanted to cover kind of what we have that we're waiting from. Some have been signed by the governor, others are still waiting. But as passed by the legislature, we've got, and this is the late term version, we've got the World Cup bill, we've got contract kitchens, we have cannabis advertising, we have cannabis management contracts, we have a 24-liter transaction limit removal, so it's going to be a repeal. And then we also have our agency request bill around. There are some old licenses that are not used that we've had repealed, and then there are others trying to streamline the MAST program, so making it consistent across all on-premise license locations, that if you're serving alcohol for on-premise consumption, you need to have the MAST permit. It was done by license type, and we had some inconsistencies even in statute, so this was just kind of a cleanup, and so we'll have some rulemaking around some of those. We've got a new rules intake form for the internal stuff we've been looking at for a while because people have ideas. And so what we would like to do is take some of those ideas that people are sharing and try to fold them into active projects where we can. And so they're not all going to be launched as an independent project at this point. But at the same time, if there are repeals or something that they were wanting, and we can fold that into some of our repeal work out of one of the legislative implementations, we're going to strategize around that. So we've got our first 4 internal requests. So a big thank you to licensing for participating and being the first to engage in that. And so we're making sure that the process works well. And we're in the evaluation right now on trying to figure out where some of these could be plugged in with other stuff. And some of them, may not be able to be worked on right away. And that's just, what we'll have. But that kind of, based on the conversation this morning, we may be able to flag some of those, like the rule petitions that we don't accept, and maybe build in a space on our tracker. So we're going to have an internal tracker that we can see all of these things, so that could be visible on here are some of the the petitions that we didn't accept, but we're interested in exploring and having those so we can fold those in. So it's more visible for my rules team to kind of see and coordinate as we go through. So Kevin, our new rules manager, is doing a really great job. He's stepping in, strong leadership. He has a very strong background knowledge of all the rule processes. So I'm really pleased with that. And we've already started strategizing when one of our folks will be out on parental leave this summer, that how he can pick up and make sure that we keep moving things forward, because sometimes in the past things have got stale or missed. And so we're making sure that that doesn't happen with all the different rule projects that we have going on right now. Other areas that we're working on is trying to make some of our rules work more transparent to the public, also internal, so people can see, hey, where are we at with rule projects? What does this look like? But we're kind of in the conceptual stages right now of a dashboard that we would have. I don't know how interactive it'll be, but it would be something similar that you would see maybe on the legislative page. So here's where the bill is in the process, right? And you have milestones that kind of identify that. So that's what we're kind of thinking, that we'd like to have something for all of our active rule projects to have. If somebody's like, hey, where are we at with this? They can see, oh, this is where we're at. Here's where the public hearing is going to be, et cetera. So it's more of a visual instead of going into a CR 101 saying, where is this information, right? That's always cumbersome. So we're planning on bringing that forward in the near future. We've got a lot of work. Mallory's been a big help, and Sarah and Mallory are going to be working on this from the research standpoint, as well as process improvement that Mallory is going to help us coordinate around some of this work. We've also we're looking at some of those older petitions that we accepted, and we just haven't had an opportunity, or based on legislative implementation and all these types of things coming through. So we're trying to strategize on how to make those visible. Where are we with those? Some of them, quite frankly, like we have the heavy metals that's been sitting there for quite a while. Well, Department of Health is working on their medical compliance rules and heavy metals. And so we want to make sure that we're not setting something up that we're going to just have to go back and redo if we're not coordinating with Department of Health. And so the reason for that delay is we want to see where's health going with some of the heavy metal requirements for medically compliant product. Are there opportunities to increase health for all consumers? But there are some things that we need to be conscientious of that we want to make sure that aren't creating risks in other parts of the laws or regulations. So we're trying to be pretty mindful in that particular area. We are, as you heard, we're planning on opening some R&D rulemaking. That was not based on the petition or anything, but we had that conversation come up during the cannabis sampling rules. We had the conversation come up in the lab rules. So once the lab rules are finalized and have been codified, which is in just over a month, then we can open it up. So we can't open new rules that have current rules that are open. So if we're opening up the same thing, the code reviser has to close all of that out before we can then ask to reopen that rule, or it screws their stuff up. So we have to pause to be able to open that until the code reviser is done with what they're doing there. I already talked about the policy discussion group that we're having. Some other issues that are coming up that we're working on. Research is focused in a number of different areas, particularly around the dashboards and briefs. They've been helping us on the product placement information. We've taken a look at like general marketing practices, not necessarily specific to alcohol, but how do stores market their products? Because we looked at like the end caps and freestanding displays up front and the back of the store. And there's some really interesting information about marketing strategies and how profits are capitalized on those areas. So for example, one of the things that we saw is in the back of the grocery store, those freestanding displays can actually increase sales over 400%. And so, if we were to say none of something like that, that's a huge impact. So we have to figure out what's the balance. Where do we want to to reside in that area. So we've been working with a lot of folks, meeting with a lot of different stakeholders. This week we met with the Washington Wine Institute and the Wine Commission. We've also met with some of the national associations. We've met with the Beer Institute. We've met with Molson Coors and Anheuser-Busch.
It's generated a lot of interest.
It has, yeah. And so we've also met with, the Large and Small Grocers Association within the state. So there's a lot of interest. The beer distributors we met with on these. And so everybody's really interested in finding a solution. I think that there's a lot of understanding, and they see that some of the points that we were making around the crossover products and securing product, from the theft issues, I don't think we're getting any disagreement in those areas. They are concerned about things like the freestanding displays and caps, and how they can market some of that type of product. So we're working with folks on that. We're hoping to have some stakeholder engagement later in May, again with a new draft. And so we'll be continuing to progress on that. The other thing that research has been looking at is around place of last drink. With the change over the past decade of a lot of polysubstance use, there's been a lot more blood draws happening versus just straight breath tests, because breath test doesn't necessarily attribute with other type of drug impairment. And so for years, we were using the BAC Data Master with the breath test results that would come directly to us. And we don't get as many results because of some of these blood draws. So we're exploring things around, is there a way that the courts can share some of the, closed cases and have that detail that would be in there, or maybe through DOL, because DOL is already getting that. So we're exploring a number of different options, working with traffic safety, trying to figure out how do we get these types of tools potentially in place for Larry's team to be able to capitalize on for educational purposes and whatnot. And then one issue that's come up that we may need to talk about potentially even for next year is we've had over the years this longstanding issue, but people trying to move out of their license and allow other people to assume it, including family members and the like, when there's liability still there, like tax liability and that sort of thing. So the concept is, should we be exploring something around not allowing that transfer if there's outstanding debt to the state and that kind of a thing. So just a concept at this point. We'll be talking with Mark and other folks, and I don't know what the legislative temperature around that would be, but so we have identified internally that there's a need to be looking at these things as well as potential recovery options, and obviously with the financial situation the state's in, I think, hopefully there'll be some interest in exploring these options so we can make sure that the collection is maximized as best that we can. So, and the last thing, we couldn't do all this. Just thinking about Administrative Professionals Day, we could not do all the work that we're doing in our policy area without Tierney's help. She helps coordinate across all the divisions with scheduling and getting folks, meetings internally with a huge number of people, all of these external meetings, just doesn't miss a beat, stand-up job. So just a big thank you to Tierney for all her work that she does for our team. I'll stop there if you have any questions.
Thank you. And here to all admin staff who are critical to our work. So thank you, Deb, Gretchen, and everybody else. Pete, anything? Ollie, welcome back. Anything for Justin?
Just a quick one. Can you remind me where things stand with the buffer zone rules?
So the buffer zone issue was, so there was a bill that was moving through. We had discussed with folks, I think Mark was working with members on a potential amendment. That bill didn't move. So currently we don't have anything in play. If we wanted to do something, that could be another rule project. It will not be as robust as what would have happened in the legislature. So we could potentially look at amending rules around how we measure, but other than that, that's not going to create as much of a fix as the legislation, because we're still going to have to look at based on the statutory requirements, we still need to measure from like the perimeter instead of the main entrance to the main entrance type of thing, which would have created a little bit more latitude. So that would be something that we can discuss. and continue to explore. We haven't launched into another internal conversation as we've been looking at what all the legislation is. And of course, with FIFA coming in, that's going to be like, people are going to be anxious to have those in place to be able to do the statewide alcohol service.
Thanks.
You bet.
All right, thank you, Justin. All right, Tony, you're gonna close us out today. So, general agency update.
All right, thank you, Chair Bollendroff, Member Holmes, and Member Garrett. We are currently recruiting for our HR director with Anita Bingham retiring at the end of June. We've received a lot of applicants, and our goal is to interview the week of May 5th. We'll have all of the directors interview the candidate, and then they can move on to Will and myself for the second interview. We recently responded to an inquiry from Results Washington. Jessica Dang helps us with all of those types of things. Results Washington asked for information about our key services. We provided them an inventory of our key services, and we provided them 10 pages of our customer experience successes and projects. And we expect that we will get an executive order eventually focused on customer experiences and needing to provide Results Washington more information in this area. They wanted to get some information so they could figure out what parameters should be in the executive order, was my sense of where they were going. So she did a great job collecting information from all over the agency and providing that to Results Washington. So we'll keep you up to date on what happens. And if you would like to see those, if you haven't been provided those, they're in an easy to read format if you want to see those. So we can get those to you. We are also following up on our employee engagement feedback survey. That is the survey that's done every October, the one that's done statewide, and then LCB adds on additional questions. After we do that survey, we get the results. And this year, a few months ago, we had a pizza lunch where we essentially celebrated some of the results, talked about the results, and we did another survey because we like to do more surveys where we were trying to drill down to the next level and get more information from staff. And we focused on collaboration. And Jessica Dang gave the leadership team a presentation on the results of that survey yesterday. And some of we had 137 staff answer that survey, which was awesome. Sometimes you get like 50 people to answer a survey, and then that can be disappointing. But we got a lot of good information about what our staff want, what areas they want to see us improve in regarding collaboration amongst divisions. And other areas in the agency. And so Jessica is going to turn all of this information in this slide deck into a one-pager that we can share with staff. And then also, of course, we need to do some action items based on the results of this survey. They gave us suggestions as a result of this survey. Some of the suggestions are training and development, face-to-face interaction, communication and transparency, support, and accountability. So they also gave some kudos to divisions that are working well together. There was a lot of good positive feedback about the interactions between E&E and licensing and E&E. So that was good to see. So we're trying to drill down on our survey results so we can increase the positive results next year. So we also talked about our strategic plan yesterday at leadership team. We currently have lots of action items throughout the agency. Different divisions have different action items that they are responsible for, and then they report back quarterly. We're talking about starting in July, perhaps having less small individual action items and having some projects, perhaps, which encompass some larger activities. Instead of, I think she might have said we have like 100 action items. Mm-hmm. Is that right? 100. I wrote that down. Yeah, which is a lot, but that's like throughout the whole agency. And so instead of having so many smaller action items, having some bigger ones that are organized as a project that involve cross-divisional work and that we can report out and hopefully show how that larger work is moving towards our goals in our strategic plan. So it's a little bit hard to show how all the individual actions are moving us towards that goal sometimes when you have 100 of them and they're done by all these different people throughout the agency. So that's one idea she's bringing back to the what I call the senior management group that works on the strategic plan. To talk about having a couple projects. We could still have action items because we still want to reflect the good work that people are doing within their division and relate it back to the strategic plan, but we don't need to have perhaps 100 action items. So they're going to work on that possibility of doing some projects, some larger activities that will be organized as a project.
So I have a quick question about, so I just happened to be recently poking around in the strategic plan and looking at the action items by different divisions.
Yes.
And when I went in, some had stuff in there and others looked like there was no activity. Is that going to address that issue, or why? I wasn't quite sure why there were some who had identified progress towards what they were working on and others who didn't. And I'm assuming it doesn't mean people aren't working on things.
Right.
It's something else.
They're supposed to report every quarter.
Okay.
And so if there's a specific division that you're not seeing, I would suggest that you email Jessica Dang and ask that question directly, because as far as I know, they're all working on their action plans.
Okay.
And so it might have been something, hopefully the dashboard was working correctly. And so I don't know if there could have been something hidden behind something else, but they're all working towards their goal. And we have met our goal as far as how much we expected to get done by this point in the year.
Okay, I'll check in with Jessica.
Okay, yeah. Regarding leads, you heard Becky talk about the system and how they're working on it. It's fair to say that there were more bugs in the system than we expected, or that I'm told by our SMEs. But we are working hard to address those bugs and those defects. We have what Accenture calls hypercare. We're in the third week, and what that simply means that they're putting a lot of people working behind the scenes for the bugs. They are responsible for fixing these bugs and defects under our contract. We work closely with them to make sure that we are on the same page, that we agree this is a bug or a defect, and that they agree as well, so that it's covered under their responsible area under our contract. And we recognize that this is hard for the licensing group. And as evidenced by the high volume of calls, that customers also feel some of this pain. The good news is that the hypercare team, which is LCB and Accenture, they are releasing fixes every week. Eventually, we will go to a 2-week turnaround in fixes. Next week, I think, will be the last week that we do a weekly fix, the rollout, if you will, or release. That's somewhat fluid. It could be changed back to weekly instead of bi-weekly. If they do it bi-weekly, they explained to me, though, that you'll be able to release more fixes if you do it bi-weekly. We had a good meeting this morning involving George and his deputy director, Jill Murphy, who's very much involved with monitoring the contract and this post-release work. George is having good meetings with Accenture, and Accenture sent me a very positive email this afternoon reassuring me that they're on it, and they're gonna make sure that we reconcile our lists and continue to work hard to fix the bugs and defects as we continue to make this a better system. So I think this is all, although it's more than we would like, I think it's within the norm. It's within the normal realm. It doesn't mean it's not difficult for their group, because I know it is. And so we're trying to stay on it to make sure that those bugs get fixed as soon as possible. And I recognize that other bugs will come up too. It's not just we fix this 50 and then we're done and we close it out and leave it. That we're gonna have other things that come up. And so we're continuing to work on that. And George has been a great partner in working with me and working with Accenture on that. Great. So kudos to all of Becky's group and her management team for being patient with this change and having to work pull out all of your change management skills and all of your patience to lead your team through this. In addition to, as Becky and I have talked about, eating chocolate, we also have to do things besides eating chocolate to get through this, because we can't just eat chocolate. So we, but it helps.
Broccoli.
Broccoli doesn't quite get us there, Member Holmes. I don't know, but we are working hard. Lastly, I'm just going to mention that I apologize for not telling Director Grant that we meet here in person and that you could have emailed your slides in if you wanted to show slides and then they just put them up on the screen. That's my fault. But I am traveling a little bit with Larry. We're going to Tacoma tomorrow to visit the office. We went to Montlake Terrace a while ago. So tomorrow he can give me an earful if he wants to, because he'll have me in the car. But we're going to try to visit more offices together. And Larry has been great about explaining how important that is, that the regional offices hear from me and Will directly, and that we go and visit them. And so I just think that that's great. And he just did a really great job of explaining that yesterday, especially when we're talking about strategic planning and action items and even employee appreciation. How do we connect the 11 field offices with everything that we're doing here? Making sure that they're feeling appreciated, but also making sure that they're getting clear communication about what's happening, and that sometimes that communication should come from us in person and not just 5 layers or just emails or whatever that is. So I appreciated his comments yesterday to the whole team, and so that was great, and that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Tony. Any questions, comments for Tony? All right, hearing none. Any additional updates from board members or comments from board members? Seeing none, that takes us to the end of our agenda, so we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So.